Do you think you being there made him sweat to a certain degree? And was that a factor? And do we know why he chose this moment
to
Dubai turn himself in?
The fifth estate has followed me.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, right? Maybe that contributed in some way that suddenly friends and people were messaging him, telling him, hey, the journalists almost found you. Who's to say the police may not? I mean, I'd like to think in a perfect world, perhaps we had something to do with it, but the thing is, we don't know. We don't know why he came back. I don't know if it ever came out in court why he came back. I have my theories, possibly.
Hello and welcome. My name is Josh Sager.
My name is Garth Sharif.
And you're listening to the Fraud Complex, a podcast where we unpack wild true crime fraud stories without murders.
And today, I'm really super excited to have Stephen D'Souza with us. I happened to meet Stephen in person, I believe at the Certified Fraud Examiners Conference in Toronto. And Stephen, we knew before I had met him because read his bio, does amazing work as a journalist, but also very specifically to our podcast. The very first episode of our podcast was on the Toronto Airport Gold Heist, which is still, I think, our most listened to podcast. And we're just absolutely thrilled to have Stephen here to help fill us in on things that have happened since we recorded that podcast about a year ago. I'll introduce Stephen. Really excited to have him here. Our guest today knows the Pearson Gold Heist better than just about anyone outside the investigation itself. Stephen D'Souza is a co-host of CBC's The Fifth Estate, an institution, by the way, 50 plus years now, something that I have watched since I was young, Canada's premier investigative documentary program. A veteran reporter and foreign correspondent with more than 2 decades at CBC, Stephen serves as the network's New York correspondent, covered 2 U.S. presidential campaigns, and co-hosted Marketplace before joining The Fifth Estate. His team produced the definitive investigation into Pearson Gold Heist, reporting that tracked a key suspect all the way from northern India and prompted authorities to act within days of broadcast. Stephen, welcome to the Fraud Complex.
Thank you so much for having me, Garth and Josh. Really appreciate it, and yeah, big fan of the show. So happy to be here on the show with you.
We should just end the podcast with that. I feel really
good.
I have to say, I did listen to your first episode in preparation for that conference where we met in person, and it was really great to hear your take on the gold heist, because it allowed me to put my mind in the mind space of a fraud examiner to see the case from that perspective, which until that point I hadn't really thought of it that way. So it was really helpful in getting me prepared for speaking at that conference. So thank you to you two for that.
Yeah. Stephen, you told me that at the conference. I told Josh that immediately. In my darkest moments when I have a rough day and I'm like, I need to pick me up, I think about the fact that you told me that. I'm like, Stephen said that. I was totally surprised and really happy that you said that, because you were there at that conference, you were speaking to this. The headline of the story itself was just eye-popping. And it really kicked off our program in terms of a topic to get into to examine fraud. So it was a year since we recorded that podcast, and sometimes things happen in a year from a fraud, sometimes nothing happens. So, Stephen, we wanted to ask you, what has happened from your point of view since our recording of the podcast about a year ago in this case?
So the biggest development in this case was one that really came as a huge surprise to me, and I think to anyone who had been following the story, is that one of the suspects, there were 9 suspects originally charged, only one was in custody, and that was the driver, Durante King McLean, who was arrested in Pennsylvania in the U.S., accused of smuggling guns. And so one of the suspects, a man named Arslan Chaudhry, he was hiding in Dubai, and he turned himself in. In January, it appears that him and his lawyers had worked out a deal with the Crown for him to return to Canada, and he turned himself in. And it's interesting because my producer and I, as part of our documentary, went to Dubai to try to find Mr. Chaudhry. We had sources that told us that he was in Dubai, and we had a sense of some of the people that he may be interacting with or that he knew. And so we went to try to find him. Unfortunately, we didn't, partly because Dubai is a very big place, and it's very difficult to do the kind of investigative work that journalists do freely in Canada over there. So, but we did hear that we came very close after the fact. I did hear we came very close. But so it was amazing to see suddenly this guy that we had gone searching around the world for, suddenly walking back at Pearson Airport right into the hands of law enforcement and back in custody. And then he subsequently pleaded guilty to one of the counts, which was theft over $5,000, and was sentenced to 4 years in jail. And this is the man that police described as the mastermind. One of his fellow suspects called him the top dog, and was essentially the person that police alleged was the principal planner behind the gold heist. So really sort of the main guy now is in jail and getting 4 years for this sensational crime. We can leave that to be a debate somewhere else as to the merits of that, but definitely a huge surprise and a huge development in the story.
Wow, that is so shocking to me. I mean, a few things jumped to mind as you were talking. It sounds like as a journalist you have in some ways, and tell me if this is totally way off, but is there a slight advantage to going to a foreign country as a journalist versus like Canadian law enforcement couldn't just go there. They would have to jump through different types of hoops, right?
Yeah, and this was definitely the case here in that we had a little more freedom. And that's a tricky word to use when talking about countries like Dubai or the United Arab Emirates, where journalists don't actually have a lot of freedom. But, it's easier for us to get on a plane and go looking around for him than it would be for police, where there's a lot of work that's involved. And one of the reasons why the criminal element enjoys going to Dubai is because it does have very difficult extradition rules. So it does make it a haven for people to go to. And so, our hope was that at the very least we could get him on camera and put some questions to him. It just, unfortunately, that we didn't get that far. But we did get a sense of just how easy it could have been for them to sell the gold in Dubai, because one of the options we had heard was that it was either some of it was going to be sold in Canada, but some of it was going to be taken overseas, and Dubai and India are sort of the two main options that a lot of people have. And it seemed that at the time India was kind of cracking down and making it more difficult, and Dubai was an easier place to do it. It's still not super easy, but we went to the gold market, and it didn't take us very long to find somebody who was willing to overlook the fact we had no paperwork, and we had done sort of like a scenario where we were telling people we had gold that we were ready to sell, and a couple people were like, "Yeah, we'll sell it for you, but we're gonna have to tell the police and report you." And then another guy was just like, "Yeah, no papers, no problem. We'll get it done." So I mean,
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy to think that we could go all the way over there, and that he was hiding there, and seeing that he came back and he had been hiding in Dubai gave us some confidence that we were on the right track. We just didn't get all the way there.
Do you think you being there made him sweat to a certain degree? And was that a factor in? Do we know why he chose this moment to
Dubai?
Turn himself in?
The fifth estate has followed me.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, right? Maybe that contributed in some way, that suddenly friends and people were messaging him, telling him, "Hey, the journalists almost found you. Who's to say the police may not?" I mean, I'd like to think in a perfect world, perhaps we had something to do with it, but we honestly, the thing is, we don't know. We don't know why he came back. I don't know if it ever came out in court why he came back. I have my theories, possibly. His older brother, Ahmad, is one of the other suspects who was charged. But Ahmad's charges, if you look at them, are only after the fact of the gold heist. It wasn't necessarily anything to do with the gold heist itself. And so one of my sort of theories is that perhaps he came back and maybe worked out a deal to say, "Look, I'll plead guilty to whatever, but maybe drop the charges against my brother." So that is a possibility. I haven't looked into that as to whether maybe if that's taken place or not, but that's something that maybe could be something that could be a reason for him. To me, that seemed to be the most likely reason for him to come back.
Well, I'm not saying anything about the crime, but that's kind of sweet. Maybe that's the brothers. And just trying to figure out that, because it is strange that he came back from Dubai. It seemed to be a safe haven for him. I'm just curious. You said you knew you were really close to getting to him. I don't know if you can say this, but how did you know that, and how close were you to having an interview with him?
I can't say how close we were because I don't know, and I can't say how we know we were close either. Sorry.
Well, I love this. This is 50.
As you know, when you watch those
journalistic
interviews
integrity. keep your.
Oh no, it's like you know how you hear sometimes when you hear like intelligence agencies like, oh, we can't divulge sources and methods and that sort of thing. And I don't want to make it sound too clandestine what we do, but at the same time, I can't really get into sources and how we knew what we knew.
Stephen, we don't want this podcast to be in any way the podcast or the way in which something negative happens to your career, which will not happen, but definitely not here. So yes, absolutely. I'm just curious about it.
Fair question.
But it was also interesting what you said to me. For me, the real gold in Dubai is the Dubai chocolate. But that's just me. I had no idea there's an active market for what is it? Fancy bootleg gold? I don't know what you would say.
I mean,
but
it is a legitimate gold market, so a lot of legitimate gold goes through there. But with that, in the past, the rules had been quite lax, so there were large amounts of illicit gold being moved, or gold that was mined from places in Africa or other places that wasn't quite legitimate. So Dubai over the years, I used to know. I remember I had studied up on this for the documentary, and I can't quite remember all the details, but over the course of the years, they have tried to crack down on this much more. And so even the fact that when we went into one of these gold shops in the gold souk in the market, one of the merchants said, well, we could do it for you if you don't have any paperwork, but we're going to have to file paperwork with the police.
Oh.
And tell them that we're selling this gold that we don't know the origin of. And so that's something that the police have brought in order to deal with this. And we visited one guy, a Canadian who's there, who is involved in the gold trade, and he said that there's cameras in his office wired that go to the police in Dubai. So he's like, yes, look up and smile because they're watching us right now.
Wow.
So there is quite an operation to try to weed this out, but it still does happen.
Right. So they know it's an issue in Dubai. They don't want to. I imagine because of Dubai and those places in the Emirates, they don't want to have those types of reputations for having this type of activity happening there. I'm just one of the things because it has been a year and we kind of talked about this off camera. I'll just put myself out there. I'm getting a little older. My memory not as great. I won't say anything about you two. So just for those that may have listened to the podcast a year ago or looked at this, like Arslan was, as you said, the top dog in this case. So we're going to get to the different characters, maybe just a good refresher. Was he, for just putting him in the heist, was he part of another organization? Was he acting alone? Was he just someone involved in criminal enterprise before? What was the context for him even thinking about this being possible?
So it's interesting because it seems like the suspects all kind of knew each other in different ways. So some of them, it seems like they knew each other from high school growing up. It sounds like others knew each other from just like the social scene. And I believe two were actually related through their parents. Archit Grover and Amit Jalota, I believe, might have been cousins, if I remember correctly. So there was some, there's some relations. Yeah, and then the driver, Durante King McLean, was an employee of Archit Grover, who had a trucking company. So there's all these little sort of connections between everybody. But I mean, I think about one of my favorite movies, which is Ocean's 11. And, there's a famous scene where after they collect everybody, they meet in Vegas and they sort of go through the mechanics of the heist. And I don't think it was like that. I don't think it was the case of, at least I don't know. I mean, we really don't know the sort of the background of how this all came up exactly. I think a lot for me, it seems like it was probably opportunity, but it is an interesting case to look at all these specific characters and all these suspects and how they all sort of fit in and whose connections are where. And I should say, for legal purposes, Arslan Chaudhry is the only one who has pleaded guilty in this case. The rest are still facing charges and still have to go before the court. So these are still allegations that they're facing.
I see an Ocean 11 like scene where you have a slow motion of the waybill being printed and dramatic music as it's being printed, and that's where you get the tension in whatever Netflix version of this happens.
That's the thing. The brilliant mundanity of a waybill being your ticket to riches,
and the simplicity of it all. Yeah.
It seems so achievable. I mean, I know this. You mentioned 9 suspects. That seems like too many. First of all, that's too many people involved. That was where they went wrong. But the idea of like an insider prints the waybill on the printer, that waybills are printed, and a driver, and just someone who kind of knew the mechanics of how to do this without raising eyebrows right away, at least. And it just seems so brilliant, but also not enough money for the trouble. Like, that was so curious to me. Like, I don't know how they would split, what was it, $20 million of gold?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just getting back to like the simplicity of it all, they pulled this off without ever drawing a gun, no weapons involved, no violence involved. For all intents and purposes, it was just a regular day at the office for these warehouse workers, for the people and like the people around this. And it was fascinating because we did a timeline in our documentary, and I went back to look at it just to remind myself, of just how quickly this all transpired. But the plane landed at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon that day. By 5:50, just about 6 o'clock, the gold was in the warehouse. About half an hour later, this cargo truck pulls up. The driver gets out and hands that doctored waybill, which was for a shipment of seafood that had actually been picked up already the day before. But they doctored the waybill, and then, it was so fascinating because the Peel Police gave us, they showed at their news conference little snippets of video, but they gave us the raw footage. And so I was just sitting there. I remember we had different camera angles and we synced them up, and you just watch, and it's boring. It's not exciting at all. But only until you realize what you're watching, then suddenly the drama comes in, because you see a guy just walk up to the office. Then there's a shot of the wide shot of the bay where all the doors are that go out to the trucks. You see him walk over, open the door, and then he hangs out for a bit. And I think it's like by 7:30, the worker arrives with the forklift and the pallet with the gold inside, and they do this dozens of times a day, and for all they know, it's just another package going out the door.
Seafood.
Yeah, seafood. And I mean, we talked to a guy who's a customs broker, and he talked about how lax the processes and security was there, and that all you needed was that one number. There's like a tracking number. I forget the exact name of it, but as long as you have that, you basically and you tell the people in the warehouse that's the number of the package you need, the rest is fine. And if you have an inside person who already knows all these systems, and so the guy loads it up, gives him a fist bump and closes the door, and he drives off. And as far as the worker knows, I mean, this poor guy, as far as he knew, he was just doing his job.
He just sent in some fish.
Like, I doubt he probably even looked at what the shipment was.
Oh, just a box.
Yeah. And then it wasn't until later so it was the whole time between when the plane landed and when it was out the door on the truck was 3.5 hours. It wasn't until later that evening that the Brinks truck showed up, and then they realized, oh wait, we've got a problem.
Yeah, 3.5 hours. Sometimes like 3.5 hours pass for me, and not very much is done. They accomplished a lot in those 3.5 hours. That was the thing about our first case in this. That was actually part of the interesting element to this story. Is there's no double guns, there's no contortionist, there's no Andy Garcia. Elliot Gould's in the first film. I think he's Canadian. Maybe, I'm not sure anymore. But none of that. We had 9 people, but it was just this, and that was the part Josh and I talked about. It was like, wow, this is just really and we talked about it from my point of view, and Josh not being a CP. I was looking at it, internal controls and all these things, and that was the part that surprised us.
I think it surprised everybody, including the police, who probably expected something different. But I mean, and I think I mentioned earlier, like, I think one of the things that was the driver behind this was the opportunity. And I think there's a sense that some of these people involved may have been involved in other things in the past, and they saw an opportunity where they see things coming and going in and out of this warehouse all the time and think, hey, we know gold shipments come in every now and then. It wouldn't be hard for us to make this thing disappear pretty easily. And who knows how long it took before maybe they watched these things come and go and developed a pattern and understood or maybe it was just on a whim. But I mean, these are the things we don't know, and maybe in the trial that stuff will come out a little bit in more detail. So,
Yeah, and you mentioned the brother possibly being a motive for the mastermind turning himself in, and that is the sort of the missing piece of this, and I'm so curious as we get more details. If there was a movie of the week of this story, what would the emotional driver be? And was it just money, or was this guy's family motivated? Did he need it for for family reasons, or is it I don't know what it would have taken for me to do something like this, but I feel like greed, like 20 million split amongst 9 suspects, isn't enough. But
and would you get the full 20 million? Because you have to actually sell that gold.
And I mean, honestly, I don't even know if all of the suspects were ever paid. I don't know if that ever,
double crossing.
One of the things that we came up with in our investigation was the list. We had a photo from the investigation of the list, the ledger that Arslan Chaudhry had kept, where they listed all the different expenses, and they even gave money to their parents, like good Indian boys that they are. Somebody's parents got some money for whatever. There was a whole bunch of different things listed for a condo. There was something about a boat. There was all kinds of different things, a watch. Yeah, I don't know who was the one responsible for the money, who was responsible for doling it out at the end. And even just each individual person, I think when you talk about motivation, I think it may have come down to each individual, like what their motivation might be. Like I could easily see in a movie Arslan Chaudhry being, if he is indeed the principal planner, maybe being the driving force, and the brother maybe trying to talk him out of it, and then maybe getting slipped into it. And
I'm in.
And then you have others who maybe were just along for the ride, thinking it was a good idea. And you have Simran Preet Panesar, who's police have described as the inside man, the guy we tracked down in India. His wife was an aspiring singer and actress. Maybe his motivation was to try to finance one of her films or a music video or something. Again, a lot of this is speculation because, as I said before, these are the things we don't know is what everybody's actual motivation was, besides, I think, just money and opportunity.
Yeah, we should make sure when we release this podcast that, if Netflix uses this, we make sure that we get credited for any,
yes, indeed.
any things they have to enter into the script themselves. Because the part that I'm most interested in sort of the relationship part, it's interesting to think about Arslan and what his relationships were and his brother and all those, but the inside connection, because you really need, Simran, you needed him, right? You needed the inside individual. And we can get updated about him because you can't do any of this without him, right? Your investigation, the police, they all talked about his access, which was a problem for Air Canada. And again, we won't talk about Air Canada in that sense about, what they did right or wrong. But what Simran's relationship was to Arslan, like, what was that relationship? Maybe you can give us context for if they were friends or knew each other, and
yeah,
how did Simran go from that person inside to being part of this heist?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think they might have been friends from back in the day. Yeah, I don't recall exactly the connection between Panesar and Chaudhry. Because the other thing is we have to remember there's another suspect who worked at Air Canada as well, Parmpal Sidhu.
Right.
And so he was also there on the inside. But Simran Preet Panesar had a higher role. He was a manager. And so he would have been able to sort of manipulate the processes a little bit more than possibly Parmpal Sidhu could have. But what's interesting is that, and police talked about this, I think, right when they announced the charges way back when, was that Panesar was the manager. He was the guy that gave police the tour of the facility.
Oh, really?
When they came, I can't remember exactly how many days it was after the heist, but here are detectives and investigators walking through this crime scene, trying to make sense of the processes, trying to figure out the mechanics of how this all went down. And the guy they allege is the inside man is the one actually giving them the tour of the facility. And I think police have said after that he did appear somewhat nervous and kind of flustered as he was giving this tour. But that there is, that's a movie scene right there.
That is.
Oh my God.
If I've ever seen, just thinking about this guy, what's going through his mind? given
Right.
everything he knows,
And
and then he's trying to explain to police how the place works, and the people that are looking for him are right in front of his face. Like, come on, you can't write that any better.
No.
forgot that or didn't I didn't realize that he was sort of just trying to play it cool. And did he was he then arrested or did he actually run
No,
away
no.
and
So
then get
this is
arrested?
the other part which would make a great scene. And yeah, Netflix writers who are listening to this, make sure you give us all credit in some way. But
Please.
police did tell us afterwards that they were aware of Mr. Panesar's connection, and they were aware of him as a suspect. But the challenge was, and then so this is what happened is that they got on to him at some point, and they realized that he, is allegedly involved. He's one of their prime suspects, but they hadn't quite figured out who else was involved. They didn't quite know who all the other pieces were just yet. And then they come to a very critical point where Panesar tells his boss that he's leaving Canada. He's going to India with his wife because she's going to pursue her career there. And so police had a very difficult decision at that point. Do we arrest him on the spot knowing that he's one of our key suspects and we'll have him in hand, or do we let him go? And then they had to weigh the pros and cons of each decision. The pros is that you have one of your key suspects and you can say, look, we've arrested the inside man, the man we think is the inside man. But if you don't know who everybody else is, all of those people get scared off and suddenly are in the wind and disappear, and you may never know the extent of
Right.
who was involved. So police said they made the difficult decision of letting him go and continuing their investigation so that they could build it out and figure out who everybody was.
Like, what do you think was something that was motivating the police? Because there's two things at play. You want to arrest the as much of the planning group and see how far this reaches. You also want to recover the gold, I imagine. Right?
Yeah. And I think that was part of it too, is that I think they probably felt that if they just take him into custody, they may not ever find the gold or they wouldn't get enough. And whoever did have the gold would disappear forever. And I mean, at that point, I think it was still early on enough in the investigation that there was a hope the gold could be recovered. But I think the police have said this themselves, that there is no hope, or
Oh,
they've
okay.
kind of given
Well,
up.
there's an update.
Yeah,
Like so.
I think they've said this themselves, so I don't think I'm
No, I guess in the year since we reported it, none of the gold. I don't want to put words out there. Like any of the gold
No.
has been recovered.
No.
Interesting.
Whatever was recovered, I think they announced at the initial press conference, and I think it might have only been like $80,000.
Right. It was those like bracelets and things like
Bracelets and
that.
some other stuff, but that was it. Like nothing.
Wow.
So 80,000 out of 20 million,
Okay.
and that's at 2023 prices. If you think
Right.
of how much gold is
Well, maybe this did pay off.
yeah. Maybe they just wanted to hedge against markets, and they were just
Right.
looking for a safe investment.
You got
maybe that's all it was.
you got the nature of this show, Steve. We speculate. We think maybe they're financial planners. They understood the gold market would go up.
Yeah, they needed that 10th guy. They needed that CFA or the CPA on their.
Yeah, CPA Breaking Bad. Part of this podcast is we actually learn about these frauds and ways that they're committed. Now we know there's possibly, not to say anything but Dubai or India, but possibly there's ways to have gold that's ill-gotten, possibly purchased for. What was interesting that you said about Simran and Panesar, we'll call him Panesar just for the audience so that they have the consistent name. So he gives this tour. So he hangs around. Do you think that was part of the plan? Like part of the plan was that Panesar we need more time for everything to happen. Maybe move the gold out of there. So we need Panesar to sort of give us the time by just pretending like nothing's happened here. I can take people around. What was his reason for doing that? It's a really big risk.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how much they would have thought about the aftermath. Like, you think about, like, did they have an exit strategy for this? Was it always the case that he was going to go to India after a few months to sort of go away and get away from things? I don't know. Yeah, it's a great question. Like, did they think, oh, you better stick around because if you suddenly disappear after this gold heist, everyone's going to know it was you
Right.
or suspect you,
Yeah.
right? Like, does it make it then very obvious? Whereas if you just stay, maybe they don't figure out who it was. And I mean, there was that one little clue that they were given that the driver had left behind a fingerprint
Right.
on
Waybill.
the document, on the waybill, because he had taken off his glove, I think, at one point to hand it to somebody. And I think there were other ways that police were able to figure things out, but that was obviously a key thing. So they might have almost gotten away and planned like the perfect heist, but eventually I think there was always going to be, I think, a world where the inside people were going to be exposed.
I just love the idea of like the police are onto him. Maybe he knows they're onto him, maybe he doesn't, but his move is to give his like 2 weeks notice and be like, he could have just got on a plane, right? But he's like, no, I'm going to play this as cool as possible. Be like, oh, it's my wife's career. This is a normal thing. Like the amount of patience and sort of just everybody knowing what everybody's doing perhaps, but nobody can say it. It just is really remarkable and like oddly civil. It's just nobody pulled out a gun. Nobody made any big sudden moves.
Chase.
There's no chase.
There was no Bronco. There was no wild chase
There's
down.
no Bronco. Yeah, it's like that's the question I have. I think to follow up on Josh, that's the question I have for you, Stephen. Like, because you're going in there as a journalist, you're not knowing what happens. Police are investigating. How surprised were you when it came down to the details being a waybill, inventory access, knowledge of the flight, that this was no violence, as it were, and that this is the way this transpired, and this amount of gold was stolen? Like, what was your reaction? You watched the video. You told us a video of watching the forklift take out the crate, but did you expect this to be the case when you decided to investigate this robbery?
Yeah, I mean, we watched that press conference back in April of, I think it was 2024, when they first announced the charges. And I think we were like everyone, we were just fascinated by the idea of this or something. There's some sort of romantic notion about a gold heist, and there's enough, movies in Hollywood about it. And the mechanics of it, I think, were quite fascinating because it was almost something that even a Hollywood writer couldn't have dreamed up. We talked about Ocean's 11, and yeah, there's a contortionist, and there's the master of disguise, and there's the inside man and the driver, and all these sort of stereotypical roles. And here was the police said that Arslan Chaudhry was in a hotel texting the inside man and the driver and the others, and giving him instructions and things as far as we can understand. It's yeah, I mean, I think just the simplicity of it all is what always fascinated me about it, and just how simple it all seemed to be when you break it all down once you know how it all worked.
I feel like the idea that not everybody got paid, part of me is like, good, they were doing wrong, and another part of me is like, God, they put their life on the line. You didn't get the guy. Probably some of them were promised something and then they didn't get it, and it's like, yeah, the heist is one thing, but then the aftermath and keeping 7 or 9 people quiet, it just seems like, as simple as this was, it's easy for even a simple plot to unravel.
Yeah, and I don't know that for sure. Like, I don't know 100% if people weren't paid, but it's definitely the sense that we got just from looking at like the ledger that was out there, and just it just seems that there's maybe not all of the gold was sold. I don't know. Again, it's really hard to know these things because nobody knows what happened to the gold and where it ended up.
Yeah, I want to ask about another person because we didn't profile one of the individuals here as much. We focused on Panesar. I did want to just say this because I just watched this. Die Hard 3 is a fantastic heist film, and it's gold. By the way, it still holds up. But I just want to give a little shout out to Die Hard 3 with Jeremy Irons.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's a gold heist. That is actually how you see a gold heist. Explosions and Bruce Willis running through the streets of New York with Samuel L. Jackson.
Massive distractions happening someplace where there's still gold over here. And
yeah, it's almost like even the Inside Man with Spike Lee's film had I don't want to give away the plot of that film because there's a twist.
That's another great one, yeah.
Yeah, it is a great film, but there's it's trying to have less violence, but there's still just all this tension. One of the things I think we didn't talk about as much in our podcast, or maybe at all, was this other insider. What was their role? So we know there's Panesar, but there's another insider you mentioned. And how are Panesar and him connected, and what was his role in this?
Yeah, Parmpal Sidhu. We don't really know too much about his role in sort of in the mechanics of the gold heist, from the information we had, it appeared that he was in constant communication with Arslan Chaudhry, who was on the outside throughout the day. But in terms of his role of planning and that sort of thing, we're not really 100%. We don't have a lot of detail as to his role. It is fascinating, though, that there has been some other reporting done subsequent to our documentary by CTV and W5. Recently came out with a series of investigations looking at safety and security at airports. And one of the things they looked at was the people who work at the airport and how much security and safety screening or security screening there is for those workers. And one of the things they found was that Parmpal Sidhu had been on police radar in the past for possible involvement in drugs. And going back to, I think, 2008 or 2012, his name came up a few times in links to possible different investigations. So if that reporting is accurate, which I have no doubt that it isn't, or that it is accurate, that gives us a sense of perhaps an idea that if they were comfortable moving other things, possibly drugs, through the cargo facility, then it becomes a case of opportunity. Right. And of course, those are, again, what was CTV reported, what we've been talking about are allegations, and Mr. Sidhu still has to go before the courts in all of this. But
was he arrested?
He was arrested, and he was released on bail. All of them are going before the courts, and I think the trial begins in September, I believe. Okay. And again, I haven't looked into this in a while, so I don't know the mechanics of this, because a lot of times these processes move slowly, and I believe there was a debate about whether they would be tried all together or separately, and now that Arslan Chaudhry has pleaded guilty, I don't know if that throws things.
So we have, it's Arslan, Panesar, and the other individual are all, or did we say, I always forget with Panesar, is he in custody or not?
No, Panesar is the one hiding in India. Or not?
Yeah, so Panesar is, yeah, so he's still not. The one that's interesting, the one that the police said, we'll see what happens. So if he goes,
Panesar is in India, and I think you mentioned this in the intro, that the Enforcement Directorate, which is one of the legal agency in India, they raided his house a few days after our story aired, because we worked with local journalists to help track him down. Partly because India, the government wasn't giving us visas to go to India, so myself and my team, we couldn't go ourselves to find him. And so we had to enlist the help of local journalists. And essentially what we did was used social media. And as much as Panesar was over in India, his wife was still posting on social media. I think he was posting as well, but they were posting enough that we were able to figure out where he lived based on his social media.
Don't come on. So, you did the heist and you're still posting. Not that I'm cheering for these guys, Stephen.
But I mean, where I stand. If you are concerned about being found, I don't know if posting things that show your neighborhood are a good idea.
But at the same time, you might want to show a little bit of what it got you. If you got, there's some braggadociousness. I don't know what's behind those social media posts.
They were incredibly mundane.
Oh, mundane posts?
They were not showy. There was literally just snippets of day-to-day life. But there are enough snippets of day-to-day life which, people who know what to look for.
It's not even just mundane posts. There's, Panesar's that, throwing off bling and gold, and it just, the neighborhood cat.
Garth, like if you decided to go for a run today and you snapped a quick selfie in front of your house and said, "Hey guys, feeling good, we're gonna hit 20K," I could probably find enough things in that photo.
Okay.
To triangulate where you live.
Yeah,
if you did that enough times, not that I want to give away too much, because I do want people we're looking for to continue posting on social media.
Yeah, do that. But if my thought is, Josh, and you let me know, if you're gonna take a selfie after committing a heist and give away all this information, embraces your thievery versus a run to the neighbor. Why am I upset? This guy, Panesar, is super interesting to me. Walks the police through the crime scene, now taking photos that are mundane of him running, clearly potentially giving his location. I'm curious. This character is of interest to me. Josh, would you be posting stuff like this after a heist?
I would never post it. I'm far too cautious. But I would definitely, I'd probably slip up and take a selfie of myself in a bath full of gold and cash, or sprawled. Like, that would be something I would just want for my kids to be like, look what Dad got away with.
Well, I should say there was a photo of his wife posted before they left on social media where she was wearing gold bangles. And
Okay.
this photo had been circulated in the South Asian community in Brampton on what's various WhatsApp groups. And it made its way to us. And we spent a lot of time analyzing this photo to understand if those bangles were the same ones that looked like what the police had seized.
Right.
And in the end, we decided that it wasn't. It didn't. They didn't look. They weren't the same. But it was close, and it was enough that it was one of those things that run rampant in the community. And part of our job is to knock down sort of rumors and innuendo and that sort of thing, and just report as stuff that we can show as factually as possible. And so this was one of sort of the many sort of dead ends that we chased that and didn't end up developing in anything.
It's a fascinating case.
I also want
ahead,
to highlight a couple of times, you've mentioned your team was able to go to Dubai. Your team was able to work with a sister journalist system in India in a way that law enforcement just didn't have the same sort of influence. And it's just like a fascinating and worth emphasizing the role of journalism in actually getting to the bottom of something like this in a way that countries can't diplomatically always do directly.
Yeah, I mean the amount of red tape for a police officer in Canada to try to get information from a police officer in India. It's not as simple as just picking up the phone and saying, hey, do you know anything about this guy we're looking for? It would have to go up to Global Affairs Canada, which would then have to talk to the consulate here, or then reach out to the Ministry, I think it's called the Ministry of Home Affairs in India, and then it would trickle down. You can just imagine sort of the organizational chains that it would have to go through. And, whereas we just called up local reporters in the area where we thought he was, and then we have some of our own freelancers that we use that we're very familiar with and are quite skilled at this as well, and we ended up finding him. Yeah.
I learned about that part of international investigation from Rush Hour. I just want to let you know, just to.
It's been a while since I watched that one.
Yeah, it seems to be on TV. I do other things, Stephen, please. I do. But if there's a rerun out there, I'll watch part of it. It was Rush Hour 3, not even the first one. So I don't. Still have the same problems. Yeah, so Josh's point about the work that you're doing and the journalism that's involved, because it's a different side of how we might come to look at a fraud case where there's the police, the lawyers, and all of that stuff. Like, just asking you, and you can relate it to this case, how much of this is like having to do a lot of the detailed work and going through all these documents that you get access to? Like, how much of it is, I guess, also, where do you get your joy from? Is it the details of pulling this all together? Because there's going to be a lot of minutia, because you get the amazing Fifth Estate produced documentary and everything's moving, but you guys are doing a ton of work behind the scene, a lot of documentation, chasing, a lot of detail.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear your perspective of how you find that.
Yeah, it really is a case where the stuff we put on TV is sort of the most dramatic stuff. For example, you'll see us chasing a suspect down. We did a story about human smuggling where we tracked a guy down who was living outside of Toronto, and you see us confront him on his driveway, or we confronted one of the gold heist suspects in front of his home. But what you don't see is us sitting out there days or for weeks leading up to it, for hours at a time, just watching to try to see if we even know if we have the right house. And then before that, we'd spent weeks trying to get documents that maybe listed somebody's address, or it was a spreadsheet which had various information. And then we spend more weeks going through that information, trying to sort it out and figure out what we can from it. And honestly, the minutia is where I do find joy and find, that sort of needle in the haystack. And it's interesting, with AI now, a lot of this work, people think, oh, I'll just get AI to summarize this document for me. And every time you open a PDF, right, there's that little window that says, would you like me to summarize that for you? Which you can, but then as a journalist, especially an investigative journalist, you lose so much by having that summarized by a computer. Whereas when you read a document straight through, and it could be 20 pages, it could be 200 pages, you start to absorb things, you start to see patterns, you start to read between the lines and understand things in a more in-depth way that then helps inform the investigation. You start to notice different things. You start to understand relationships between different people or things. There's just so much more you can glean by reading it yourself. And those are really the things that I enjoy, is getting a report and figuring out the little nugget of something that's buried on page 55. I remember court, we get a lot of court documents, more so from the US than we do from Canada, because their court records are a lot more accessible. But in the smuggling case, I remember getting an affidavit for somebody who was arrested, an American who was arrested in the smuggling case, and reading the affidavit. And as we read through the police case against him, we started to see nuggets of information that confirmed something we had reported in a previous episode. I was on my laptop and I was messaging my colleague who's in Halifax saying, "Oh my God, turn to page 15, paragraph 4." And then he was already ahead of me. He's like, page 21. And suddenly the person we were looking for, something was about him. Anyway, it was these moments that, only for a journalist or whoever, nerds, whatever, we were very excited by this. And
you were with two other nerds.
My wife sitting on the couch, my wife, who is also a journalist, who also appreciates this, was just looking over at me like, why are you going nuts right now? Like, why?
No, this is stuff we want. We want this. That you went to page 153, you got excited, you call, that's the detail.
Yeah.
Josh, I'll let you get the reaction to the amount of work that's involved here, but the fact that you love the detail.
Well, and you mentioned something that hadn't occurred to me, also sort of about like these WhatsApp groups and the community surrounding and all the relationships. There are perhaps 9 suspects, but then they all have relationships and they're all on their phones. And how much of your process is working through, WhatsApp is almost like removed from social media, right? Like it's sort of a private thing, but gaining access to that, you must have to have ties to that community that are, helpful. And it just seems like all these little details have accumulate to getting these leads.
Yeah, and a lot of it is for us is trying to get to the primary sources of information as much as we can. Having somebody tell us something they heard secondhand is good to help inform us or give us direction, but it's not something we could necessarily report. So we always try to get to the heart of things as much as we can. And in our documentary, there was a journalist named Nitin Chopra, who is a South Asian journalist based in Brampton, who's very well connected in the community, very well respected in the community, and he helped open some doors for us to get to some of these things and keep his ear on the ground to things he was seeing in various groups or what people were sending him. And then once people knew I was involved, like I would get stuff sent to me as well. And so it is a difficult task sometimes breaking into these communities and getting people's trust, but that's a big part of the job is earning people's trust, earning the trust of sources that can then help inform the reporting and help inform the story. And I did one story once where we were trying to convince someone to talk to us, and the threat that he faced and the reason he didn't want to talk was because he felt his life or property could possibly be in danger. And we sat with him for probably 2 hours at his dining room table talking about things and life and why it was important for him to speak out. And eventually he did come around and he did do an interview with us. But that's a lot of the work sometimes, is knowing who has the information, knowing who is best to tell the story, and helping them tell the story in a way that informs the audience, but also hopefully, depending on the issue, brings about some change as well.
It's a tremendous amount of work that you do it yourself, Stephen, in the Fifth Estate. Now, my brain sort of works in pop culture. I don't know why. Now I feel like I have to, go back to my love of journalism, watch The Paper and Spotlight. And journalists, this is the amount of work you did. I'm going to posit this, and you don't have to comment on it. But I feel like you might have done more work in the investigative journalism to connect all these things for this gold heist than the people who planned and executed the heist. You don't have to say anything. Josh, we could talk about it because we're not really held accountable for these things. But how do you feel?
For listeners to the podcast, I'm smiling but not responding.
Stephen's giving nothing away with my comment.
It's inspiring to me that some of these fraud and heist cases that we've covered seem like they're simple, and in a way it's like the simplicity is what you're after. And I feel like I'm being trained to look for opportunities in my own life where there might be 20 million gold bricks, waiting for me in some way, and just trying to figure out an easy way to get it. But my learnings from this are like, keep it close, not 9 suspects, 1 or 2 maybe. Make sure it's worth it, and don't let the journalists anywhere close, because that's going to be a problem.
An email, that's true. If you get an email from Steven D'Souza, or he comes up to my door, I'd be like, Steven, this is for the podcast, right? Imagine you get that. The name comes up, you are at the door, they're like, I know who you are. This is not good. This is not good. Have you had that before? Where people are like, right.
I haven't actually. I think my colleague did one time, Mark Kelly.
Mark Kelly, yeah. Okay.
I think he was in an airport, and I'm trying to remember exactly how it went down. I think somebody said hi to him, or he might have been saying hi to somebody, and then they realized, oh wait, is this good or bad? If you're coming up to me and talking to me, did I do something wrong?
I'd be a little nervous.
Yeah,
I'd be a little nervous.
And I say that I say that half jokingly to people when sometimes people will approach me saying, "Oh, I have a story for you to cover," and they want to promote something, which is fine. But I say, typically if I'm doing a story on you, it's not for a good reason. So
it's not for a good reason. Yeah,
you probably don't want me covering anything you're involved in.
It's not. Like, again, you're doing amazing work, but if you're on the other side, if you're doing something criminal or something illegal, you would not want to see yourself.
We absolutely do want people to open the door and answer our calls and return our emails, because that's how we get our stories and that's how we get the information to the audience.
And that's what you do really well, too. You're also opening people up. And we're going to say this a couple times. Go to the Fifth Estate YouTube station. Why am I like 100 years old? Channel. Gosh. I mean, there's stuff, I was telling Stephen off camera, they've done stuff on the Dixon fraud that we covered in one of our episodes. I mean, there's stuff, like, again, it's an institution for me because I've been watching episodes. I can go back and see which ones I remember. I watched it when I was a kid because it was just dramatic what was happening. Also, this sense of justice that's at the end, or sometimes some like ... what's going to happen. This is an insider question, and I'll have a couple more questions. I told you this could take a while because we love to talk here. One, this is just a pure inside question, and you don't have to answer this question either. Your relationship with W5, this is very Canadian. Is it good? Because are they competitors? Are you friends?
Yeah,
I know W5 too.
All of the above. Yeah, no, there is obviously healthy competition. I mean, they strive to they do amazing work. Their documentaries are fantastic. Their investigations are fantastic. And I mean, it pushes us to be better as well. I think, having healthy rivalry and healthy competition is great. And we're also all friends and friendly. I mean, the investigation I referenced about the airport was done by somebody who used to work at CBC. And I immediately messaged him when I saw the report come up and said, great work. I wish I had done that, because we had, after the Gold Heist documentary, considered doing more on what was happening at the airport, but for a number of reasons, we just didn't have a chance to, and we're working on other stories. But it's great. And Avery Haynes, who's the host of W5, actually, is good friends with many people on our show, and I've spoken to her a number of times. And they do amazing work. I just think society in general, journalism in general, is healthier and better when there's more investigative journalists doing the kind of work that we're doing. The fewer of us there are, the worse it is for society in general. So I think the more of us there are, the more of us doing the kind of work that the Fifth Estate and W5 do, I think it's better for everyone.
It's absolutely. I mean, it's the work, but it's also just, I think it's nice to hear the behind the scenes work that you guys do. For your end products are amazing, but the behind the scenes work, it's funny because it's such a kind way of thinking about, somebody that's in the same space, because I don't know how Josh feels, but other fraud podcasts, I hope they don't make it. I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm a bad person. I don't know. Josh, how do you feel?
Are there any other fraud podcasts?
I don't think so.
It's a zero-sum game, these podcasts. There can only be one.
It's zero-sum. I have one last question, Josh, because we can go on. Well, maybe between Josh and I, give you a question here, and then send you on your way to other investigations or continuing investigations. For me, coming back to Panesar, do you have a sense of what motivated him to do this as the inside, like one of the insiders, but really the key one? I
mean, the sense we got from when our colleagues in India approached him is that he maintains his innocence. Yeah, so in that sense, no, we don't have any idea on that, because he's maintained his innocence, and I think through his lawyer as well has expressed that, although at one point I do believe his lawyer had talked to police about coming back and him turning himself in, but that never amounted to anything, and it's been, 2-3 years since. Long-winded way of saying I don't know.
Yeah, this is the difference between yourself and Josh and I. You've given us that, and there's the innocent until there's a guilty verdict or whatever the verdict might be. When we also try to subscribe to that, of course, as well. But at the same time, we can posit some stories for Panesar as to why he did it. Like, he doesn't like the new rebranding from Air Canada. Doesn't like. He just felt like the new marketing, the new marketing platform and what they've done, and the food and not necessarily as many. It just felt it got to him, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. None of that is on you, Stephen. That's all on me. Josh, would you like to speculate? Like really unfounded speculation?
There's so many great ways to approach motive, but yeah, a personal grudge against Air Canada could be one of them. Absolutely. His wife's acting career, another. I mean, that's beautiful. I think there are some heartstring potential moments in this story of why people do what they do that I do want to see the movie of this. Absolutely.
Do you think there will be some version of this
I just think
somewhere outside of Fifth Estate? Like,
there are documentaries in the works, I know, but more
even a fictionalized version.
I don't know how dramatized they'd be, but like not. Yeah, I don't know. I know there's definitely interest in the TV production world about doing more on this.
Who would you want to play you?
Good question. You.
Oh, come on! I give you Idris Elba. We gotta go big on these. He's apparently not gonna be James Bond, so there needs to be some things going on. But yeah, I just think this would be interesting. Josh, any last questions for Stephen? We don't want to keep you here the whole day.
One just question I forgot to ask, but did you get a sense when you were in Dubai, what is the black market exchange rate for gold bricks? Just for if I ever get involved in this business, what can I, am I taking a 25% hit or like an 80% hit?
No comment, as I want to be able to travel to Dubai again sometime.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way for us to go out. I love that you were looking for that. To be honest with you, I'm also kind of curious about it, but it's good non-answer or no answer.
We didn't get far enough in our process to negotiate price and terms, and once we had what we needed, we got out of there because we did not want to be on the wrong side of the law in Dubai.
The CPC can consider hiring Josh and I on the down low where we could do things you can't. Realistic integrity.
One step removed, further step removed from law enforcement. Think how effective we could be.
Well, let us loose out there, Stephen. If you find we could get out of the field, we'll probably just really destroy your investigation, but it could be very good, entertaining things for YouTube.
I think that's a whole other podcast right there. Take the podcast on the road. I'd love to. I think listeners want that.
Yeah. Was that a contract? Did we sign a contract?
Well, Stephen, we want to just thank you so much for sharing your insights and these updates. And, we want to thank everyone for listening. Thanks to our show editor, Adam Galloway. Remember to subscribe and leave us a comment about a fraud case you'd like to discuss or comments on this case. And you can also email us at fraudcomplexpodcast@gmail.com with fraud cases on your mind. And again, Stephen, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys. It was great.
It's great to have you. And again, Fifth Estate, go to the YouTube channel, watch any number of them. Again, they're also they're not that long, too. There's a lot of action going in these segments. But absolutely, I'm going to do that tonight. I'm going to watch a few of these. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Josh.